Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm about to be joined with my guest, Darryl Anka. Now, Darryl is the channel for Bashar. Bashar is a being of extraterrestrial origin, a friend from the future, who has spoken for the past 30 years through channel Darryl Anka. Now, Bashar brings through a wave of new information that clearly explains in detail how the universe works and how each person creates the reality they experience. Over the years, thousands of individuals have had the opportunity to apply these principles and see if they really work to change their lives and create the reality that they desire. Darryl Anka, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you providing the opportunity today.
As I said off air, I really appreciate you giving us your time because I know how busy you are.
That's all right, my pleasure.
Well, it really is an honor to have you on because I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time because you've popped up a lot for me, and a lot of people that watch the show have always said, get Darryl on. You've got to get Darryl on, and so it's great to have you here now. You're still very much in the film industry, that's right, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a writer, director, producer. In fact, we just finished the Bashar documentary, First Contact, which we're now getting out to the public slowly over the next few months.
Well, let's get into that in just a minute. That's right. That's a fact. I've seen the trailer. We're just playing the trailer on the screen right now as well. Okay. Everyone's got a backstory. With yours, was there anyone in your family that had any sort of psychic abilities, or have you become aware of anything in the past few decades that anyone in the family did?
Not to my knowledge at all. No. If they did, they certainly kept it to themselves. So nobody ever talked about anything like that in my family.
But when your parents discovered what you were doing with channeling, they were quite supportive, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really understand what it was about, but their bottom line was I was doing something that obviously was helping people, and was making me happy, and so they were basically fine with it on that level.
Okay, which is a beautiful thing. You can't ask for any more than that, just to have that.
Right, exactly.
No, absolutely. Was there any other siblings in the family?
Yes, I have a brother and a sister. I was an only child for quite a while, for 10 years. Then they had my sister Jen, and then they had my brother James.
And do they work with you at all with the work you're doing with the channeling or anything else, or?
Not so much with the channeling. James is also been in the film industry with me in terms of visual effects, sets, designs, things like that. He's actually quite an artist. So, yeah, we've done a lot of work together. And in fact, on the first film that I did through my production company, Zia Films, with my wife, Erica, James and I actually built all the sets ourselves because it was a very low budget film. But, we had those abilities and skills, so it came in handy.
Again, do you find that they've been supportive in the work that you do on the side?
Well, yes. Again, it's not necessarily completely their cup of tea. But they understand it, and yeah, it's just part of our lives. They just know that that's part of who I am, so they just accept it on that level.
That's nice. I mean, I know, after I interviewed who's the chap that Lee Carroll, sorry, his family did turn their back on him in a sense, and it was
Yeah.
probably a life lesson that he had to go through. But
Yeah.
you can appreciate, can't you, that when you've got something like you have a great brother and sister, that means the world when doing what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been fortunate in having the support that I've had.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that.
Was there any sort of metaphysical books that inspired you during your journey or in your younger years?
Oh, definitely the Seth material from Jane Roberts. I think that was really the beginning of sort of modern day channeling, as far as I know. And I think that was very inspirational for me in terms of getting a handle on, what channeling was all about, what kind of information was coming through that channel in particular. So I think she sort of set the stage and set the tone for a lot of the channels to follow.
I think she did. I think you're so right what you say there, and that's incredible. That I didn't expect you to say that. That's quite an aha moment. Absolutely, the Seth material helped so many bigger names out there as well right now. Some who have never come forward, and some who have. Even Oprah Winfrey read the Seth material.
Sure. Yeah. She reached a lot of people, and like I said, I think she was a real pioneer at that time, especially in the time that she was doing it. Edgar Cayce is another. It's a little bit of a different sort of methodology, but what he was doing, I think, also paved the way for a lot of people to follow.
Yes, Cayce was another big one, the ARE Center in Virginia, which still continues now and has helped a lot of people. That's right. It's all pathways to the same destination, isn't it, really?
It is, yeah, and we mentioned both of them in the documentary, to honor their, their position in all of this.
That's really nice of you to do that. Thank you for doing that. That would mean a lot to people. Okay, so just very briefly, for those who may not know your journey, what happened to you? What was your awakening moment? And I believe it was a UFO experience in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we had actually two very close broad daylight sightings back in 1973 within the same week, which was incredibly startling. First time about, I said, 150 feet away. Second time only about 70 feet away, a black equilateral triangle about 30, 40 feet on a side, with witnesses both times. And seeing something like that close up in broad daylight, really turned the world upside down. Because, I'd always heard, of course, about people saying, oh, I've seen a UFO. But, and I thought, okay, this could be possible. But, when you finally actually see something like that in concrete reality, it changes everything. So it was from those incidents that I began doing the research to find out what was going on here, because obviously the world was different than I'd been told. And one thing sort of led to another. I came across a lot of other, metaphysical books and things like that. And especially back in 1973, every single metaphysical book probably fit on one bookshelf in the bookstore at that time. So I just kind of went down the line and said, oh, what's this about? What's this about? What's this about? And 10 years after the sightings, I was introduced to a channel who was holding seminars. And I went to listen for a while, and I thought the information was very helpful and beneficial to people. But the entity coming through that teacher offered to actually teach a channeling class. Now, I went into it because I just wanted to further my research. I wanted to understand how something like channeling could be taught, because in all the books I had read about it, especially with Jane Roberts and the teacher who was teaching the class, the channeling just sort of happened to them. It wasn't something they were consciously aware of. They completely black out when it happens. And so I didn't understand how you could teach channeling. So through a series of different kinds of guided meditations in the class over a 12-week course, about halfway through, when I was in one of the meditations, I received what I could only describe as kind of a telepathic contact from Bashar and his people. in that split second, a memory came back of having made an agreement before this life to do the channeling with him. I understood the UFOs had been shown to me on purpose to get me to start learning what I needed to learn so I would be ready when the time came. And the message in my head in that one moment was, now you know you made this agreement, now you know it's time to begin. Is this something you still wish to do? It was offered as a choice. And I'm sitting there going, well, am I hallucinating? I mean, what's going on here? Because it was so visceral and so real. But at exactly that moment, and we actually reenact this in the documentary, while this was happening in my head, I wasn't saying anything to anybody. The entity coming through the teacher stopped talking to the class and turned right to me, faced me, and said, there's an entity here for you right now, if you're ready to begin. And I happened to glance behind me, and there was another student who had somehow picked up on the image of Bashar that I was seeing in my head, and she was actually sketching it on a piece of paper. So I instantly had two outside validations that this wasn't just my imagination, there was actually something happening here. So, I thought about it, I said, okay, I understand that channeling can be a beneficial thing, can bring important information through to help people. So I decided to go ahead with it and see where it would lead. I did well enough that the teacher actually allowed me to co-channel the next class with him. And eventually a woman doing the first doctoral thesis on the connection between psychology and channeling used me as one of her subjects for her paper. And as I would go to her house and channel for her friends so she could take her notes, word of mouth started spreading. I would channel for 5 friends the first week, and then it would grow to 10, then 20, then 30. We had to start doing it twice a week to fit all the people. We had to start renting auditoriums to fit all the people, within a few months. And one thing led to another, word of mouth spread, and I started getting invitations to channel in different cities in the States and all over the world. And here I am 33 years later still doing it. So yeah, I've had the two parallel careers of channeling and film making for about the same time.
Okay, we're going to get back into the filmmaking because that's very important to talk about that as well. Now, I think as soon as you started to trust it, it became clearer to you. I think you've used that term before. Yeah. How much trust did you have to give it? And because there are conscious channels, there are unconscious channels. So I'll put two questions there. Yeah.
Well, I think, what I've observed is that there are actually sort of different generations of channels, and they're becoming more and more conscious as we go along. Because I think the idea is you have to sort of learn to get out of the way, but you can kind of still understand that there's something going on. And by being at least conscious in a different focus, the channel can get something out of it too, because information and energy will sort of be absorbed by the channel while the translation is happening of whatever the entity is saying for the person that they're talking to. Because the idea is not necessarily to leave the channel out of the process. The channel gets to learn, the channel gets to grow as well. So I think people are becoming more and more conscious channels is what you're seeing. And it's also because that's an indication that we all have the ability to get into this state. And the more that we understand mechanically what's happening in a channeling, then we realize it's a very natural altered state. We all do it, all, over and over again. We just don't call it channeling, but it's that state where you're doing what you love to do. You're in the zone. You're at peak performance. You're in a deep meditation. What we've discovered is that it all leads to the same brainwave state, which is called the gamma frequency in the brain. So that is the actual channeling state, and everyone does it from time to time. It's just then a matter of how do you focus it? What do you use it for? What do you connect to? Be it other levels of your own consciousness or other entities, doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of getting to that higher point of view where your brain can start to synthesize and process information and receive information in a much more efficient way and deliver ideas that are much more holistic, come from a much higher point of view. When we get back to the idea of the film itself, there's something that we did in the film that I'm very excited about to demystify the whole concept of channeling, which I think is one of the more important things that we can do in this day and age, to take it kind of out of the woo-woo factor and show that it is a natural altered state that we're all capable of achieving.
And we'll get into that demystifying as well. Don't worry, I won't forget. And you're so correct what you say, because I've had a lot of channels come on recently, and it's much more conscious nowadays. I've had the World's Youngest channel come on, to all sorts of channelers that have come on through awakened experiences, through, from 9/11 to all sorts of events that have happened in their life to cause an awakened experience. And yes, it's much more, it feels like now, as though people are teaching people how to channel from the higher self.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the higher self is involved anyway, no matter what. Even if there's some other entity involved, it still has to process, in a sense, through the higher self and then through the physical mind. You have to function on a more holistic level where you're using all the different components of your consciousness in order to really plug into that higher level of information.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe there's been a shift in energy in the planet. That's why something shifted to become conscious in a sense. Now, one of the things with the Seth material as well, that Seth did say that Seth would only come through Jane Roberts. Have you ever had anyone that's saying they're channeling Bashar as well?
There has been in the past a few people that Bashar was willing to work with for a while to sort of kickstart them into their own channeling. But at this particular point, he's only coming through me. Now, people sometimes can tap into other members of his civilization, but Bashar himself at this point is only expressing himself through me, because we're connected in a sense on a higher level as the same soul, so to speak. So in linear terms, it's like he's one of my future selves and I'm one of his past selves. And the purpose of the channeling right now is to focus down, to bring certain kinds of information through a single source, which is me. But again, like I said, there are people that sometimes can tap into other members of his society, because this is really all about contact, and it's about forming a broader connection between our civilization, their civilization, and other civilizations that we may be on the verge of meeting in the near future. So, yeah.
I do apologise. I said Bashir there. I know it's Bashar, isn't it? That's a dyslexic person's way of interpreting it, right? So I do. Yeah.
It's just an Arabic word that means messenger. It's not his name. They don't have names.
Right. Okay. And just before we get into Bashar as well, just a few bits into Bashar. With other entities coming through, like Abraham-Hicks, Abraham, for example, it's a group collective. There's also a collective out there called The One. It's a collective. Yeah.
Right.
Now, obviously, this is not a collective. This is.
Well, it is and it isn't. Because they're telepathically connected to all members of their society, there can be a collective listening in and suggesting ideas and funneling information to him and through him. But he is also, as every member of his society is, also an individual, an actual physical individual.
Now, they are in another dimension. Is that how we would term it?
They're in a parallel reality, right? But they have a planet, they have a physical civilization. I mean, they're evolving to the point where they're less and less physical in terms of the things that they need or require, but they do still have a physical presence. But yes, their reality is in a parallel dimension from ours.
So when he's communicating, I say him, right? But it's just personified.
Yeah. It's a he.
It's a he. Yeah. When he's communicating with you, so for example, if you were going to channel now, he's not going to sit back at the same time and receive you. It's not like that, is it? Or
time for them isn't quite what it is for us. They're much more flexible in space and time, and therefore we're never interrupting him in that sense. And sometimes when we're having the conversation with him, he may have already had the conversation in his time frame, or he may have yet to have the conversation in the present moment, because his consciousness can slip up and down the timeline to wherever it needs to be to have the conversation. So whatever it is he may be doing at the present moment doesn't necessarily get interfered with to have a conversation with us. He can do it from whenever it needs to happen.
See, I think the state of channeling that you're going to, I think this new paradigm of channeling, where it's on a lighter level in a sense, is harder. it's much more difficult because you're in the way. I think your connection still is a lot deeper, and you're able to go in not in a Edgar Cayce sort of trance state, but it's almost it's touching that. And I personally I just think that that's an easier state to do it from because you're a little bit less.
Yeah, I'm focused in what I would call a very dynamic daydream during the experience. So I don't really hear the words. I know there's something going on, but I get images, I get feelings, abstract, concrete, sometimes. But I'm having my own experience, and it's dynamic and strong and powerful enough to keep my attention so that I'm not trying to think about what's going on between Bashar and the conversation he's having with another person. So it is in some senses conscious, but I'm completely distracted by my experience. It's sort of like if you're having a daydream and someone walked in the room and went, Kevin, Kevin, and they had to call your name like 3 times before you even registered that somebody was talking to you. It's kind of like that. The conversation that's going on between Bashar and another person is just a translation into words. That one of the it's sort of a secondary level. One of the analogies I often use for the feeling I get is it's like if you imagine a waterfall and you're standing square under the waterfall and getting pounded by this water, and that is what's absorbing completely your attention and your experience of that. The person having the translation is getting the spray. I'm standing in the waterfall, they're getting the spray. So the spray is very secondary to me and not really the key experience. Therefore, I'm completely absorbed by the experience I'm having, and there's just no reason to pay attention to what's going on with the translation. So that's how I get out of the way and yet sort of maintain a sense of consciousness.
Now, some people hate the word channeling. They prefer the word receiving.
Yeah, anything will work. I mean, we use channeling because it's just what's become the typical word. But yeah, I mean, and that word doesn't really explain the mechanism that's going on, because there's a lot. I mean, again, this is one of the reasons why we wanted to demystify it. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the mechanism of how these things actually work. I think there's still a lot of sort of outdated definitions and concepts. People, for example, I think still feel or believe sometimes or think that when someone is channeling an entity, that the entity is actually in their body like a possession. This never happens. It's more like 2 tuning forks vibrating in harmony. When you reach a certain frequency level in the brain, the entity can somehow match that level, or you can get closer to matching theirs. You're operating on the same wavelength, or at least a similar enough wavelength at the same time to have the same kinds of thoughts. And so it's more like the idea of a telephone, literally, and exactly like what's going on right now. You and I know that we're not actually hearing our original acoustic voices. It's being translated into electronic signals and then translated back into an acoustic sound at your end and my end. So channeling, in a sense, is technologically similar. You get into a vibratory state that is representative to a great degree of the vibratory state of the other entity, and they do the same. When you start vibrating in harmony, you're having the same kinds of ideas happen in you at the same time, and that functions as a translation for the entity's thoughts. But there's no such thing as actual possession in that sense. It's just a matching of frequencies and a translation of ideas.
I had a gentleman called Wallace Thornhill on the show a few days ago, and he was the author of the book The Electric Universe. And it's his theory that the electric universe gives us the solution of how channeling possibly could work, how thought is instantaneous.
It is. Everything is here and now, really, and you're just changing your frequency to access information that's all around you all the time, and consciousness that's around you right here all the time, but you don't see or is invisible to you because you're not functioning on the same frequency until you do switch to that frequency. It's kind of like, Bashar's often used the analogy of a television to sort of explain it on a simple level. At any moment that you're watching a particular program, you know that there are dozens of other programs playing simultaneously, but they're invisible to you unless you change the channel. So it's kind of similar to that. You know, we just can access whatever we need to access when we operate in harmony with the frequency that represents that experience.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know how many personal one-to-one readings you do or have done.
A lot.
A lot, right. Now,
actually, at the moment, I'm actually doing about 3 a week.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm already booked to the end of the year.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I say wow because well, exactly. I say wow because obviously you've got your day job and you've got this as well. So but with the readings that you give, are the readings very much like a psychic reading where it predicts the future, or is it more of a I'm forgetting the word here, more of a well, you tell us.
It's
a guidance, right?
It's an explanation from Bashar's perspective of how reality works, of what the mechanisms are, how you can use them. In other words, he's giving people the instruction manual. He's telling you, look, this is how you create reality. This is how consciousness works. These are the definitions of the structure and nature of existence. And when you understand the manual, you can create the reality that you prefer. So in a sense, it's about not predicting the future, but how to create the future that you prefer out of all the probabilities that can happen. It's an instruction manual is what it is. But that's what brings it down to earth and allows people to take what have been looked at as very esoteric metaphysical concepts and ground them into something like a practical toolkit that actually gives them the results that they're looking for if they use the tools efficiently.
Right. Okay. So the word I was looking for there is teaching information. That's what he's giving.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, because if someone comes to you and said, "Oh, I need proof. So could you explain what my dad used or mum used to look like?" You're not going to get that kind of information, maybe.
Usually not. It will happen on occasion because he might be tapped into them in a certain way and be able to pick up on things. But I find that most of that happens synchronistically rather than somebody asking for it. He'll just pick up on something he needs to say that they haven't told him about, and he'll tell them what he's getting. The reason that may be there all of a sudden, it could be for 1,000 different reasons. It'll happen in a much more spontaneous way from time to time. But usually when people are looking for proof in that sense, it usually doesn't work because they're not of a mindset that they're open enough to allow him to access what he needs. They're sort of closing the door on him in a variety of ways by insisting on the kind of proof that they usually ask for. Plus, to him and to me, it's not about the idea of proving that he exists or what he can do. It's about using the information to prove the information works. And that always works when you use it properly. So he doesn't care that people believe whether he's real or not. And I don't care whether people believe that he's real or not. Channeling is a real state, and the information can prove whatever it is that someone needs to prove to themselves about the real importance of why channelings occur. And it's just all about the information and how you can use it and apply it in your life in a positive way. And that, to me, is the only proof anyone would really need.
Absolutely. And, if anyone is into channeling or experimenting with it, I think we can get tested in different ways sometimes. That's why I sort of mentioned that, just to be careful of there are things that you maybe are not as tuned into as others, and probably most channeling information is teaching information. But with a psychic, then they are picking up from. This is how I feel it works. Picking up on potential futures that are there in the present moment now. If
Exactly.
You carry on like you are.
All predictions, as far as I'm concerned and Bashar is concerned, are not readings of the future. They're readings of the present. And they're telling you, look, here's where all the probable energy is going. If you want to change that, you can. If you want to keep it the same, you can. But I'm telling you what the energies are now, what the probabilities are now. The irony in this is that a prediction can actually render itself obsolete by being made conscious to you about what the situation is at the present. Because if you don't really prefer what you're being told, you can change the energy and suddenly render the prediction obsolete. So that doesn't necessarily mean that because it didn't come to pass that the prediction was wrong. It may simply mean you've changed the energy because now someone has made you aware of what was going on in the probabilities around you. So, prediction, again, this is another example of the idea that we have very old-fashioned definitions about what prediction is. And I think that that's one of the things I appreciate about Bashar most, is he brings these definitions into the 21st century so we can understand them in some senses more scientifically. Metaphysics is really just another understanding, a broader understanding of physics that we haven't discovered yet, that we haven't labeled yet, or we haven't, given some kind of mathematical formula to yet. But I think it's possible to do so. He's often described many different kinds of rules and conditions and definitions by which these things function. And a lot of the tests that sometimes scientists arrange to find out whether these things are real or not are actually not set up correctly in order to actually find out whether these things exist, because they have preconceived notions about what it is that's happening. And in some ways, that's kind of, again, ironic, because a lot of, scientists, and skepticism is fine. You should have an open mind, but also not necessarily believe everything you hear. Cynicism is sort of the problem, where people just come in with a closed mind and a preconceived notion. But if people who are willing to sort of understand that there might be something else going on, then the irony to me is a lot of the cynics will say, well, these people are very gullible for believing these kinds of ideas. And yet they're actually being just as gullible, because they're actually accepting the folklore definition of these things as the true definition, and not digging any deeper to find out, in fact, if there's actually a truer definition of what's going on. So they're gullibly absorbing the folklore or the mythological explanation. And of course, when they disprove that, they think they've disproved the mechanism. But, that's sort of like saying that, well, because you can prove that maybe there's no Santa Claus, then that means there's no such thing as the North Pole. I mean, it's just it's an illogical kind of conclusion. Yeah. They have to understand what the actual mechanisms are behind these sort of experiences that people have been having for thousands of years, and really get down to understanding how to design experiments that would actually demonstrate these things, which in most cases, again, when people design these kinds of scientific experiments, one of the things they try to do is remove emotionality from their experiments, because they think that will produce a purer result. But in fact, just the opposite is required, because many psychic functionings are actually emotionally activated, because you have to have a great need in order to function on that level. So they're kind of going in exactly the opposite direction they need to be going in.
Well, yes, absolutely. And, when a psychic... Well, I don't think most psychics would even understand that basis of where the information is coming from in that sense. It's not
Right.
Some, a lot do, but there are some out there who just have this gift,
Right.
and will use it because it feels like the right
Right.
thing they're doing. They're helping people, which they are, right? I do believe
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, it's natural for them, but they don't necessarily understand how it works.
Well,
and that's okay.
Well, put it this way as well. When they connect with a deceased person to bring that information through their higher self to tell the client, it just
Right.
goes to show that the deceased person is still making their truth up where they are. And actually, they may be not even aware of the reality you're talking about, because they're not at that level.
That might be so, although they theoretically have a little bit of a broader point of view from that level. But yeah, I mean, there are still people involved. There are still identities and personalities involved in some way, shape, or form, and perspectives that are different from one person to another, whether they're alive or dead. So yeah, you have to kind of take everything on a case-by-case basis and really look and examine what information is coming through here to sort of understand the mechanism at hand, or why that information is coming through the way that it is. Because sometimes it's not about the literal information, it's about why is that kind of information being delivered to that person at that time, because maybe that's what they need to hear, whether it's an absolute truth or not. It's something that might be the truth the person needs to hear to get to the next place they need to be. So you really have to examine those conversations very, very closely.
I always thought that when misinformation is given through sometimes, maybe it's not done on purpose. It's done with love for them to not be addicted to being told what to do, but for them to come up with their own ideas.
It can be. I mean, again, it can be many things. Sometimes it can be a true misinterpretation because there might be filtering going on
Could be.
in the channel or the medium based on their belief systems. But yes, sometimes the entities may say things specifically because they know what that statement will do for the person, and that's what the person needs. They don't need to hear some kind of a dry academic, accurate fact. They
No.
need to hear something that is given to them that will get them to the next stage of their lives.
Even
So,
if just to say, point out something to them that they didn't even realize was on the table, but guess what? It's there
Right.
if you want it. Yeah, which comes into law of attraction and manifestation, which we'll get into very briefly as well. Now, do you think a lot of great books as well that people write, like Eckhart Tolle's done some great books, Wayne Dyer's done some great books. There's lots of great books out there. Do you think, unbeknown to them, they were channeling that information, but they'll never realize they were?
I think there's some of that involved. I mean, you don't want to ever discount, the innate intelligence of any individual person.
No.
Because, again, remember, channeling is a natural thing. It doesn't, even if you are in a channeling state when you're writing a book, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone else is giving you the information. You yourself can simply be accessing information from source, from infinity, from creation, and downloading it into your reality. So it doesn't necessarily require an additional entity for any of us to operate in a channeling state and bring through the information that we really need. And in fact, that's one of the main things that Bashar himself and many entities are actually attempting to teach us, is you don't need the entity to tell you these things. You have the capability of understanding all of this information yourself if you will just get into the same state.
Right, absolutely. Would you say by connecting with your higher self through meditation?
That's one way. There are many ways. I mean, there's no one right way. That's why there are millions of people. There are millions of different ways to do these things. This sort of comes down to what Bashar often talks about that he calls permission slips. He's basically saying, look, any tool, any technique, any object, any ritual, any belief system is a permission slip. It gives you permission, or it allows you to give yourself permission to become more of who you truly are and function on a higher level. So it doesn't really much matter what the technique is. If you're attracted to it, that's because it matches your belief system and is probably the permission slip at that particular moment that will work best for you. Next week, you may be attracted to a different permission slip because now you're a different person. So these are dynamic, changing kinds of things. They're never usually very static. And so it's the idea of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Use what works. Don't use what doesn't. It really comes down to something that simple, I think.
Okay, but the permission slip when it comes to Christianity, for example, would be that channeling is a work of the devil. You're connecting with demonic forces trying to manipulate and deceive you, and that there is only one truth, and that is through the works of Christ, and that's their permission slip.
That's their permission slip at that point in their lives. That's what they feel they need to believe to get them where they believe they need to go, and that's fine. But I think the overriding idea, of course, is to get to the point where you realize that these are just beliefs. They are permission slips, and that if you really want to take it up to the highest level, and I could say source, I could say all that is. You can use the word God, goddess, whatever you want. I don't think it cares what you call it. The idea, I think, on the highest level or highest perspective of all of that is to realize that anything that you can come up with, anything you can imagine, anything you can believe has to, by definition, still be part of God. So it really, if they want to believe that channeling is demonic, well, okay, they can. I'm not going to try and convince them otherwise because that's not my purpose in life. But it's still something that exists within a God or an entity or an intelligence that allows anyone to believe whatever they want. And that, to me, is the thing to focus on, because that means that you're unconditionally supported. Even if you believe that something else is not, you're unconditionally supported in your belief in that. And that, to me, is really the big picture, is all beliefs, in a sense, are still part of God. They're all true in their own context. and therefore not one is not better than another. It's just what works for you at this point in your evolution.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And
Sure.
just going back to Bashar as well.
Hmm.
Now he's a first contact specialist. That's what
Yes,
he would.
in
Yeah,
society.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that him coming through in as the entity that he is the right audience for you in the sense that the people who resonate with that an extraterrestrial presence
Right.
are attracted to these teachings, and that's the right
Of
people it
course.
should attract?
Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
Right. As I said, I mean, there are many different belief systems. There are many different outlets. So people will attract themselves to whatever they resonate to. And so he has to provide, along with others, that component, especially in this day and age when we are actually expanding our awareness of the universe and realize that we're most likely not alone. So he provides that outlet for the extraterrestrial vibration. And there are others as well. But sure, he's specifically the frequency for the people looking for expansion in that direction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because the right people that it vibrates with will always come to you. And to be honest, like I was saying off air as well, I was just watching a previous YouTube interview from years ago, probably 30 years ago, I think it was, right? And you've got a lot of love out there. There's a lot of people that love his teachings, and
Well,
you've
I
helped so many
appreciate that
people.
very, very much. I really appreciate their support. It's allowed me to do this for so long and continue to do it. And, I'm very grateful for that.
What would you say his main message is in the times that we live in now?
I think it's his fundamental message is, again, to act on your passion to the best of your ability, but really drop all of the insistence and assumption on what you think the outcome needs to be. I mean, to him, this is actually a fundamental energy formula. It aligns you with your true self. That's what the translation of your true energy is what you feel as excitement, passion, peace, balance, love, creativity. So by acting on the things that contain the highest amount of it, you're aligning with your true energy. It's the most of who you are. And if you do that every moment to the best of your ability, but also drop the insistence on what the outcome ought to look like, then you're allowing your higher mind to bring you what is really representative of the vibrational state of your excitement, rather than allowing your limited physical mind to insist that it has to happen a certain way, because the physical mind doesn't really have the capacity to know all the things the higher mind knows about how it could manifest things for you to match that frequency of excitement in a much grander way than your physical mind is even capable of imagining. So that formula, that three-part formula, I think is the basis of almost every single message that he delivers. That's where it all starts. That's the key, that's the seed. And from there, he can explain all the other principles.
Yes, it's almost like the same message that comes through many messages. We just don't listen, and it keeps coming through. It keeps coming
Yeah,
through.
But I find, I mean, one of the most gratifying things about doing this is when people take that information, they actually use it, they get the change, they come back and say, oh my God, it actually works. Thank you so much. That's very gratifying. So, it's about really paying attention, getting your negative fear-based beliefs out of the way, cleaning out your attic, so that you can use these techniques and these tools in the most efficient way that you possibly can. Because if you're holding on to negative beliefs, it just gets in the way and it doesn't allow you to use the tools as powerfully as you could.
Absolutely, and I hope you don't mind me using these words. It feels very much like, because I've just got into big time myself law of attraction right now, and
Mhm.
there's a lot in common with your work, and I find that fascinating because he says it in a different way, but it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
It's the same principle. Yeah, he has a slightly different spin on it, which means it's not wrong to say, yes, you have to be of a certain frequency to attract a certain thing that is relative to that frequency or relevant for that frequency. But what he's also saying is, it's not that you actually have to learn to attract that, because you're already giving off a frequency of your true core signature vibration, and that's the highest frequency you can give off. So the idea is, if you're not attracting things, it's not because you're not giving off the frequency. It's because you have beliefs that are interfering with the frequency. And if you just get those beliefs out of the way, then the natural frequency will attract everything you need that's relevant for you in your life. So it's more an issue of you're keeping things at bay, not that you're not attracting them. It's just that you're keeping them away. And if you let go of the negative beliefs that are keeping them away, those things will naturally gravitate to you because you're already attracting them. It's part of your nature to do those things, to attract those things that are most relevant for you. So that's a slightly different spin on how the law of attraction works.
It is. And do you think those negative things that are stopping us, like tapes playing in the background, for example,
Right.
it's easy for us to get in tune with those tapes. Most times, on a very shallow level, we know what those issues are. We know what they are.
Yeah. If we're honest with ourselves, we do a self-exam. I mean, it comes down to the ancient saying, know thyself. If you're really honest about your own self-investigation, you know when you're out of alignment, you know when you're out of integrity, you know when you're holding on to some fear-based belief that doesn't really work for you. And it's really about understanding that it is just a belief. It's not a fact, these things. If it's something that doesn't align with your true vibration, it's just a belief that you've been taught. And it's really about understanding that because it is just a belief, you can change it. You have the power to change it. And one of the things that is most important about the process of changing it is to be willing to identify that negative belief within you. When you're afraid to look, when you're afraid to identify these things because you think it means something bad about you, then you don't even go there. You don't discover what they are. And if you don't identify them, you have nothing to work with. You have nothing to let go of. It remains floating around in your unconscious mind, and you keep wondering why you go back into the same pattern over and over again. But once you identify them truly, they become, when they're out of alignment with you, they become truly nonsensical and illogical. And as soon as they appear nonsensical, they're gone, because you don't actually hold on to anything that actually appears to make no sense. It's only because you're disguising it that it keeps seeming to make sense and you keep holding on to it. Bringing it into the light of your consciousness and identifying it and putting a spotlight on it, as soon as you do, it will appear to make no sense at all, and that means it'll be gone. Unless you haven't found the true fundamental belief.
Right.
Keep digging if that's the case.
But what about the fear of feeling lonely? The fear of what's another fear that we all have sometimes? I guess I'm not good enough can come up, or
I'm unworthy.
I'm unworthy.
Right.
I'm lonely. I'm unworthy.
Yeah. But that can't be fundamentally true, because the short answer is creation doesn't make mistakes. And if you were truly fundamentally unworthy, believe me, you wouldn't exist, because it wouldn't need you to exist. But if you do exist, then creation itself, existence itself, must know that you have to exist in order for it to be complete. And without you, it wouldn't be complete. So on that level, if nothing else, you're fundamentally worthy. As Bashar often says, when you're going around going, oh, I'm unworthy, I'm not deserving, but you exist, you're actually arguing in the face of existence. You're arguing for something that you can never win. So why bother arguing with creation by saying I'm unworthy when creation is proving that you are by the fact that you exist? It's really a no-win situation. So it's be like, give up that idea that you're unworthy, because if you really were, you wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. And sometimes when we listen to our gut feeling and it feels right to do something, yet it didn't work out the way we thought it was going to work out, actually, it still worked out perfectly because you followed it. Yes. And you're where you are now.
Well, again, that's where Bashar says it's so important to drop that insistence on what you think the outcome should look like, because you don't really know all the time. Sometimes it'll coincide with what you think it'll be, but many times it won't. But the thing you get is the thing you need at that moment to actually get where you want to go, ultimately. It's just that there may be a process involved that will give you a deeper appreciation of where you ultimately wind up that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't gone through the process of being given something you didn't expect first. So if you treat everything that comes to you as an opportunity to learn something positive from, and you stay in that positive state, you will always get the positive and beneficial effect from it, no matter how it looks on the surface, no matter what anyone else's opinion is of the situation or reaction to the situation. It's really up to you to decide how to define the things that happen to you in your life. and to understand that things can look very different than you expected and still serve you in incredible ways. You have to stop judging them by how they look on the surface and understand that it's there for a reason and use it that way. And then you'll get the effect and ultimately see why that happened the way it did when you look back on it.
You know, definitely. I mean, I'm moving to Amsterdam soon. I'm relocating my office there as well. Well, my office, I say my studio. And I'm going to a city that's outside Amsterdam. So the main language is Dutch. I don't speak Dutch. Yeah, the second language is English there. So, you know, but I don't know no one there. But I'm going for, I'm going to further a business over there. But I'm also going because it feels the right thing to do. But am I scared that I don't know anyone? Well, sure. Yeah. But I feel if I don't, I feel if I don't do it, there's something there that's on the precipice, that there's something I can't see.
Right. Well, here's the thing also that people keep sort of misunderstanding. When something presents itself to you as your highest excitement at that moment, the idea is to act on it to the best of your ability, but understand that one of the reasons why you don't hold on to the assumption that it's got to work out a certain way or that it's got to work out that way at all is that sometimes your excitement will come to you in a form that doesn't mean that that thing that it comes in the form of has to come to fruition. Sometimes the excitement will come in a certain form because that's the form that will, for lack of a better term, get you off your butt and get you to move to where you need to be in order to then get the thing that will actually be the thing you need to do. So never assume that suddenly, like, just to use your example, I'm super excited about moving to this other city. Okay, well, if that's your highest excitement, take whatever actions in that direction you can, but don't ever assume that you'll actually wind up there. You might, but you might not, because the idea of it coming in that particular form may have been the form it needed to come in to get you to take the actions you took so that something else could happen more easily that wouldn't have happened had you not taken those actions. Yeah. So never have the absolute assumption that the form it comes in is the thing that actually has to come to fruition, because you never know.
So true. You know, for me, I'm like, I can't, it's all misty. I can't see it when I reach there. I don't know what it's going to be like. I have no intention of even trying to form it. Do you know that? Yeah. And the funniest thing was, I had my relationship breakdown in 2007 in this same city I'm going back to, right? So I'm thinking to myself, there must be some healing that needs to be done there as well. But
and that could be the entire purpose of it. You never know.
You know, it's not for what I'm going to do there big time as well. I mean, one of the things I'm doing there, I'll be honest, I've not told anyone this on air yet, but I'm actually going there because I'm actually going to set up a website selling sex toys. Believe it or not, right? So spirituality, right, and sex toys, right? Well, I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I'd love to do it, and for the money. And I think in my karma, it's something I've got to heal as well, right? I feel that on a bigger thing. But so many people listen to this now will think, "Oh my God, how can he be spiritual and do that?" Which we'll get into that in a minute.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, again, I think one of the misunderstandings a lot of people have is that physical reality isn't spiritual. It's completely spiritual if you approach it that way. Remember that physical reality is just a projection of consciousness. It's just a dream. We are in spirit. It's just that we're dreaming that we're not. So physical reality is another aspect of spirit. It's just an apparently very solid one. But as even our own scientists know, that's just an illusion. Solidity is completely an illusion. So there's nothing unspiritual about physical reality. It's just about what do you do with it?
Well, okay, it's funny you said it. I always thought to myself, what if I've already passed on and this is heaven?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think you'll know the difference. But but the idea, and this could also be hell, right, from somebody's point of view.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, but it's really just an experience, and it's really just about what you make of it. I mean, it can be positive, it can be negative. It can be as close to heaven as you can get. It can probably be as close to hell as you can get, and everything in between. But it's really up to us to make of it what we wish. So that's completely in our hands based on what we believe to be true about ourselves. It's a reflection for us, a reflection that gives us an opportunity to experience a process of change,
right,
and discover ourselves from a new point of view. Because, you know, if you don't forget who you are, you can't remember who you are from another perspective. That, in a sense, is what physical reality is all about. Because if you exist in a timeless state, there's no forgetting, there's no change. to experience the concept of change and discovering yourself from a new perspective, you kind of have to have the space-time experience and sort of forget who you were to remember who you are from a new point of view. So that's what this process is about.
Absolutely. And, for me to say that on air now about the adult toy thing, I've worried about that for so long. What will people think of me? Am I going to lose all my followers for it because you've got to be this super special guru that lives in, in this totally sex-free lifestyle kind of thing, or drug-free lifestyle? But you know what?
I mean, it's always important to examine the motivations for why you choose to do things or why you think something may be exciting, because some people will disguise anxiety as excitement, and they won't necessarily be moving in a direction that's in alignment with them. But if you've cleared that with yourself and you understand, I'm not doing anything here intentionally to harm anyone. I really have examined myself, and this really is my excitement, and it can provide a lot of benefit for a lot of people, and I find that exciting, and I'm doing it with the greatest of intention, then, you go for it. Because if you really need to be doing something else, at least taking that step will show you that you need to go in a different direction. Otherwise, you'd never know. But it could exactly be what it is that you're excited about, and you have to do that to find out.
So agree with what you're saying there, and I can say, hand on my heart, I've gone through that process very deeply, and I feel I've had to go through a lot of healing to get to that point. Yeah,
Of course.
right.
And a lot of people do. I mean, sex in a lot of cultures on this planet has a lot of negative fear-based beliefs and taboos connected to it. And so it's good to divest oneself of a lot of those things. And you can do that in a number of different ways. So, yeah.
Well, also, I've had to, clear my conscience that, am I affecting my future? That if I wanted some big talk show, will that come to haunt me? But you know what? I'm living in present moment. I couldn't care about the future right now.
Right. Well, and again, it's if this really is your excitement, it's only going to lead you into probable futures where you will attract the people that are interested in the same things, or will be willing to allow that to be a part of your life and not define you as an entire person.
No.
In the same way, again, I go back and forth between the film world and the spiritual channeling world and the metaphysical world and all that kind of stuff. I do my best to not let one necessarily define the other in any way that is negative. But here I am now combining the two by making a film about my spiritual experience. So it all kind of can work together when you can get to that point,
I'm so glad you've just brought that 360 round there, because that's what I was going to say as well, is that what you've done is you've got one foot in the spiritual and one in the physical. If you had both feet in the spiritual right now, I don't think it would have worked for you personally.
No, I don't think I'd be grounded enough.
Exactly, right? Exactly. I mean, we are here having a human experience, and a lot of spiritual people want to deny that sun and just be all, well, where am I going to, and what's that all about? What
like
about
I said,
now?
There's nothing about physical reality that is unspiritual. It's about how you live in physical reality, and it's like the Zen monks say, chop wood, carry water. There are things that need to be done in physical reality, but they can be done from a very spiritual place, and it changes the whole relationship you have with physical reality and allows physical reality to become heaven on earth. That's really the idea to me, is to bring that energy down into physical reality and transform it into something more spiritual, rather than running away from it as if there's something wrong with a physical experience, which there isn't.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to get into Zia films. I know I'm pressing against time here right now. I'm so sorry that it's kind of gone in the direction it had. Well, no, I'm not sorry it's gone in the direction. I'm so glad in one sense, right? I am. I just know that its time is not on our side. I wish it was.
Right.
Okay, so where the planet is right now, when you look at ISIS and all the issues going on right now, I never feel that there's going to be a global nuclear war. No, I've never felt that.
I don't think so.
No. But I do feel that us humans do it the most difficult way, don't we?
A lot do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where do you see the evolution of? Where would the evolution of the planet, as you see it, be heading towards, as compared to where it is right now?
Well, I think one of the reasons, and Bashar's talked about this, that we're seeing an escalation of what appears to be a lot of conflict and violence and negativity, is that we're getting everything out of our system, because we know that there is a change about to occur. And it's like putting everything out on the table and being able to examine it all and say, what do you really want this world to be? Pick something, make a choice, go in a direction that is really what you prefer. But the way that we need to do that is by seeing all the things we don't prefer, because that's quite often what helps us define what we do prefer more clearly. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing at our evolutionary point right now, is we're at the point of bringing everything to the surface so we can make the choices we really prefer to make.
Yeah. And I think the reason I've just shared my story here a little bit is to be a bit of inspiration to other people, in a sense that I think it's our stories which is the most interesting part, isn't it? I think sometimes on this journey.
Yes.
You know,
Well, that is the whole point. The journey is the destination. The process is the point. We are different stories. We are here to tell our story, to learn our story, and to live our story. So everyone's a different story.
yeah. And I think it's what you touched on as well, is that whatever area in life you go into, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, and I do live by that as well. I wouldn't do anything in my, I just couldn't do it, not me now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think, as you say, whatever industry you go in or whatever you're doing, if you can carry that spiritual torch with you and the way you treat people and your employees, even yourself as well, just the people you interact with, the space you come from affects them.
Well, and I mean, everything on a higher level is one thing. So, it's that golden rule: what you do to others, you're doing to yourself. So it's kind of like, if you understand that everyone is connected, why would you want to do anything, that would be in any way, shape, or form negative to someone else? All that is an expression of believing that you're powerless. As Bashar often says, the greatest power requires the gentlest touch, because it doesn't need to force anything on anyone. Anytime you're forcing, it means you don't actually believe in the power of what you say you believe in. Otherwise, you would know that you don't have to push it. People will find it on their own eventually.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Now, with Zia Films as well,
Yes.
you do, I'm not going to touch on this too much because it's just time, but you do deal with horror movies as well. And I think that they're a great way to, release some of the issues we have through cinema, through film.
It can be cathartic. Sure, if you do it right, we're not making just gory slasher movies or anything like that. We do sci-fi, we do drama, we do what would classically be called some horror, but it's for the purpose of having a transformation. If you get people in touch with that energy and let them get in touch with their fears in a safe environment, and then provide them with a cathartic moment, it can actually release a lot of fears and get them used to handling how to transform those fears into something more positive. So that's our take on the idea of doing a horror movie, so to speak.
Now, you'll have to forgive me here. This is the highest worst thing I've done recently is I've forgotten the name of the documentary. So,
First Contact.
First Contact. That's right. Okay, we're just putting the trailer.
We're actually doing some screenings in the States. We're doing one in Sedona, we're doing two in LA, and we're doing one in New York. We are actually in negotiation with a distributor now for the possibility of getting it out wider in the world. And if that's the case, we are going to probably start in Europe sometime in October, hopefully. So we'll see how that goes. But anyone that wants to know anything about that, the movie itself, can go to whatisfirstcontact.com or ziafilms.com, and anything they want to know about the Bashar information, they can go to bashar.org and find out everything that we're doing.
Excellent. Well, that's been coming up on the screen all the way through the interview as well, periodically as well.
Great.
And now, just so that you've got James Wood as the narrator. Now, I've got to say, he must be into the subject then, surely.
He is. I wouldn't say so. Let's just say he's more open-minded. He's
okay.
Curious. He believes that everything should be examined, not just assumed to be one way or the other. So he's into it in the sense that he is willing to say this is a subject worth looking at. It's a subject worth talking about. It's a subject worth examining. And it was for that reason that he felt that he could lend some credibility to the idea by being our narrator, for which we are eternally grateful, because he did a brilliant job.
Wonderful one. No. I mean, it looks a great movie. It really does. And you've got some other films on there as well. That Dearly Departed, which the trailer looked great for that as well. So
It was our first movie, right?
Yeah.
It's a fictional documentary interviewing spirits in the
Yeah, it's
afterlife
great.
to get their take on life after death. That's based on a lot of near-death experience reports, but we wanted to do it in a little bit more of a creative way as opposed to a dry documentary way.
No, it's fantastic. It's great. So I would recommend that as well. And of course, you are in another film as well, Tuning In. If people want to catch that, you are on that.
Yeah, that was, yes, another person's documentary in which I channel along with several other channels, yes.
Actually became quite famous, I think that one did, from people that...
Yeah. It did well.
Yeah.
It did well.
So, what would you say then, and I know we've barely covered your work here in the time that we've got, but what would you say is a really important message of your work?
Well, I think we've already sort of covered it. It really is about being true to yourself, following your dreams. I sort of say this in the documentary as well. It's like I'd rather follow my dreams and be true to myself than look back years from now and regret that I never took that path. Even though people might call you crazy, even though there might be a lot of people that would be in opposition to what you're doing or think it's nonsense, if it really is true for you, you have to be true to yourself, no matter what other people think. I think that's the basic takeaway here.
Excellent. Okay, well, it's just been a joy to have you on.
It's been great. Thank you.
It really has, and I hope what we've talked about today, helps people. And again, you'll do your conferences. They're all streamed online, so people can see when the next conference is going to be. Well, not conference, but the next live event will be.
All the information of everything that we're doing as a Bashar event is on the Bashar.org website. They can check everything out there when it's posted.
Well, Darryl Anka, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin, and good luck in Amsterdam.
Thank you. Cheers. I will have you back on in the future. Thanks, Darryl.
All right, that'd be great. Thanks, and have a great day.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.com, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.